Howard Stern, Jim Rome, Dan Patrick, and Greg Rempe. The Mountain Rushmore of talk show entertainment. Now, let's get back to the Barbecue Central Show.
And while it's not the traditional Barbecue Central Show, we welcome you into another bonus content segment here on the Barbecue Central Show. This time around, I've gathered three prominent barbecue personalities and experts to talk about ribs, to talk about brisket. We'll also talk about some Oklahoma Joe's products, as well as these three folks are sponsored in some way by Oklahoma Joe's, as the show has been through the summer. So looking forward to this segment. Indeed, let's go ahead and make some introductions, and we can go from there. On the panel this evening, we're recording on Wednesday evening, July 20th. Enrico Pasquale is joining me, Q Shanty, Wes Edwards from Farmhouse Barbecue, and Hondo Hernandez of Show Off Barbecue, all on Instagram. So it's Q, the letter Q, Shanty with a Y at the end, BBQ for Enrico. Wes is at Farmhouse Barbecue, all spelled out, BARBECUE, and Hondo on Instagram is showoff_BBQ. So if you're not following them right now, make sure that you do that immediately or as you're taking in this podcast. So let's start it like we do with folks that have been on the show not even one time, or the first time, or debuting, which is what we're all doing here this evening. Let's start with Enrico first. A little background about you, where you live, if you're not into barbecue and grilling full-time, what you're doing professionally to earn a living.
So I am from Rainham, Massachusetts, just about 30 minutes south of Boston. My full-time job is a construction safety officer in the city of Boston.
How long you've been doing safety?
I've been doing that now for about 5 years.
My Michigan embedded correspondent, John Solberg, is wetting his feet in the safety world. He did something completely different for a long time, and now safety is his gig. Is that a growing position? Like, if you left where you're at now, could you easily get another job? And is that something that perhaps folks that are looking for a position might want to start to look at?
Yes, it is, because safety is not just in construction. It's in every industry out there. So a lot of people I know start off in construction or in residential, and then they work their way into the insurance side of safety, which is dealing with all the monies and seeing all that stuff. So it is always growing. I've been with the same company now for almost 5 years, and they're who I got my start with, and I can see myself moving up in different positions within our company. So I'm always trying to grow and learn. I'm actually in school for it right now, so
nice.
I'm going to school and working full-time.
Barbecue expert and our resident safety guy here on the bonus segment tonight is Enrico Pasquale. Let's go to Wes Edwards. A little background on you, where you're living, family life, and what you might do for a day job if it's not full-time barbecue and grilling.
Yeah, I live in a little small town called Pine Level, North Carolina. I'm about 30 minutes from Raleigh, if you know where Raleigh is. I have a wife and a son. He's 18, just graduated high school, so got a good future ahead of him. I've been in barbecue competition since 2015. Been in everything from KCBS, SCA, backyard events, Carolina League. It's kind of a little bit all over. I used to work in pharmaceuticals and logistics. Got laid off 3 times and decided I'm going to start catering and being a private chef. So that's what I do full time now.
All right. So that sounds like is that something where you're able to make your schedule, or do you have a pretty rigorous client list and, the demands are pretty much the same
whatever
day-to-day?
The customer wants.
Yep.
Yeah, whatever the customer wants is my schedule.
Any high-level athletes that we might know about?
I wish. Hopefully one day.
No doubt.
If you can get me on the list with some, that'll work.
Oh, I know plenty. I'll make all the introductions that you need down there in the North Carolina area, and you'll be the barbecue chef to the athletic stars down there, no doubt about it. That's Wes Edwards. And last but certainly not least is Hondo Hernandez. Hondo, a little background on you, what you're doing professionally, if it's not full-time barbecue and grilling, and where you're currently stationed.
Yeah, so I'm in Salinas, California, right in the central part of the West Coast, probably about 10 minutes from the ocean. So everything's gorgeous. When it comes to weather, I don't think it gets hotter than 78 degrees. I don't think it gets colder than 60. So it stays pretty nice out here. So it's barbecue season all year round. But I started cooking professionally as a professional competitor for 4 to 5 years. I was trained under Ernest Cervantes, which is better known as the Pope of Barbecue, from the Burnt Bean Company, who just recently got voted number 4 on Texas Monthly, and competed for a long time on a team with him as part of the Brisket Cartel with Fred Robles and Carlo Casanova. So those are my mentors. Those are my big brothers. It's been one of those things that they've blessed me with all the knowledge that I need to set me up for success. In more recent years, in the past 5 or 6 years, I went to the restaurant industry, became an executive chef from the training that I received from Ernest out in Texas. And I've been dabbling in the restaurant industry for the past, 4 or 5 years, and finally decided about 8 months ago to walk away from the whole thing and start doing stuff on my own. So it got to a point where I just got tired of making money for other people, and it just was taking the barbecue town on the road. So I told my wife we needed to invest in ourselves, and we put all of our money into a food trailer that's being built right now in Houston, Texas. And we actually get ready to go pick her up in about a month. And so we will be hitting the coast all up and down doing events. The most recent one that we're getting ready to do is the Boots and Brews music festival, country music festival, which attends probably about 10,000 people. And they do about 4 or 5 different shows with headliners from, Tim McGraw, Brothers Osborne, and everybody there. So that's what's next on the horizon for us, and still trying to keep up with the competition schedule. I think we're going to be headed out to Dallas in the next couple months to do World Food Championships. So that should be fun.
Competition-wise, Enrico, I'll circle back to you here in just a second. It's been down for California. In fact, it's trended down for any number of years. It used to be a burgeoning competition area. Some of the best competitions every year, certainly in KCBS, were held there, but then all of a sudden they're dropping off like flies. One of my good friends, one of my good friends, and one of the longest running sponsors of my show is Big Papa Smoker Sterling Ball, of course.
I love Sterling.
One of the premier cookers, and his biggest complaint to me is, I think I could really make a push for Team of the Year, but wow, I got to travel so far, and all the best competitions in California have died off. Is that something that you think you see a resurgence of at some point?
Hopefully. For us, we've had to travel, mostly to Nevada just to go compete and do stuff. Our last competition was in Las Vegas. And anything out here on the coast, you either kind of hold your breath and hope it doesn't get canceled, or if they have enough people that are going in. It's really, really hard. But California people, I don't think people realize how big California actually is, and you do have to travel quite a way to compete. And it was even like that when barbecue was starting to go on the rise. We were even having to travel, 4 to 5 hours just to go compete. So, and we are loading up a trailer and getting everything. It's a little bit of a daunting aspect, but it's all fun. But it's not like Texas or anywhere else where you can go to, have your pick of 2 or 3 different competitions within a stone's throw, decide what you want to do. So, it's been a struggle. So we haven't really done much in the past, 2 or 3 years. Fortunately, the ones that we have done, we were able to grand in, and that was our entrance into the World Food Championship. So now, like I said, instead of California, now we get to travel to Dallas to go compete out there. So,
Wes, let me touch base with you real quick on the competition scene. You had mentioned you do it. Are you a fairly frequent competitor, or I know last couple of years have been really different as far as COVID, how that affected a lot of stuff, how people can gather, all that stuff. But now as we're starting to get out of it, in your best year, how many events did you do, and what's the climate like in competitions in Carolina?
My best year was 25 comps. That was a couple of years before COVID started. Wow. Like you said, COVID has really put the brakes on a lot of things, especially I was in a transition from KCBS to SCA just because of a financial aspect. Meat's not cheap, and competition in KCBS is not cheap. It's fun, but it's not cheap. So I wanted to test the waters with SCA, and right now SCA is on fire in North Carolina. We have great amount of comps that we've got, especially on the eastern side of the state where we're from. And we're all kind of a family. We all follow these competitions together, and we all get along and love doing them. And this year we've traveled towards the mountains of North Carolina to compete in some events, and South Carolina also. So all the whole area is really taken off.
Enrico, let me circle back to you here, since this is kind of a competition roundtable. I assume you compete from time to time, and you're in a little bit different area up there in the far northeast. Some people say I'm in the Midwest in Cleveland. I've never really understood that, but originally I'm from upstate New York, and then obviously you're a little bit more north of that. So what's the competition scene like up there, and in a normal environment, how many would you like to get in?
So for us up here, it's been dwindling for a little while. We basically have 1 or 2 organizers now who are kind of taking the reins, trying to get us comps and all that stuff. It's a good shout out to Jeremy and Kathy Trainer. They both run 2 different organizations trying to get us comps. So for us, we try to do 1 a month if possible. Sometimes I can do 2 a month, depending on financial end of it. Still being 26, I'm still trying to grow, but I've been doing it now for 10 years competitively. So
Wow.
I'm trying to get as many in as possible, but it also depends on the month. Like some months we have nothing up here, and some months we have 3 or 4. So it's what I can financially afford at that point in time, telling me how many comps I can go do.
Enrico, let's stay with you. From a live fire perspective, has it always been something that's been part of your life, or did you find a passion for barbecue and grilling a little bit later?
So for me, it started out at like 4 or 5, just in the kitchen with my mom cooking at the house. And then like 8 or 9, when we first moved into the house we live at now, we got a propane grill and I just was grilling outside. And then smoking started about 12, 13 years old, just hanging out with my buddies. We were just outside cooking and having a good time. And 16, I was like, I want to try getting into the competition field at 16. So I joined the what is now Northeast Barbecue Society, which was New England Barbecue Society at first. So we did our first comp at 16, and I was hooked on the competition field ever since then.
What was that first experience like? 16 is young. I often wonder I've been doing the show now live for 14 years. It was 2 years as a podcast before that, so almost 20 years of seeing the sport evolve. And there was what I had referred to as the golden era where Pitmasters was on TV. Everybody that I was talking to after that was saying, Pitmasters is what really inspired me to get into competition barbecue. And there was this great wave, and it's now started to trend down as we were talking about events canceling, general popularity dwindling. And then you have the emergence of the SCA, which has really started to take over competition in live fire cooking in general from a lot of the other barbecue sanctioning bodies. So, what was it like at 16? That's pretty young.
Yeah, it is. But for us, it was me and my mom going out to the first competition. My parents were always the biggest supporters. If you want to do it, we'll support you. We'll try getting you back. And at 16, yeah, I did come in DAL in one category, which was chicken wings. But my ribs were middle of the pack, so I was pretty happy. And then that following week, I went out and spent $1,000 and got my first real smoker, which was a full stick burner built onto a trailer. And then from there, I've evolved into different cookers. I mean, I use my Oklahoma Joe Bronco Pros like every other day, just cooking at the house, doing stuff. But the biggest thing is learning a craft. It doesn't matter how old you are, just given the passion and the drive is what's going to keep you going. I mean, barbecue is always changing. Different flavor profiles are always out there for us. So as a barbecue chef, you want to be willing to learn and try different things. It doesn't matter what you're cooking on. As long as you're having fun and you're doing what you love, it doesn't matter.
Well, you're doing it for a long time now. 16 going up against grown-ass men certainly had to have been, I would have been intimidated, no doubt about it. So let's go to Wes real quick and tell me a little bit about your live fire background. And is it something you've always been around, or did you get into it a little bit later?
Honestly, right out of high school, my brother-in-law, he's a huge East Carolina Pirates fan. So he started taking me tailgating and hanging out at these big events and at East Carolina University. And we're all the time grilling, tailgating parties, and started doing more and more. And all of a sudden, I'm wanting to cook all the time too. And it's like a disease. It just starts growing on you. And then I found out the more I cook, it was more of a stress relief for me. It made me happy. And I was like, if I'm having a bad day, I'm going to go cook something. I can totally relax with a beer and have the grill going. So I just kind of fell into it the older I got, right out of high school. And then, like I said, after being laid off a few times, I decided I'm going to turn this into a passion and get to cooking more. And that's how I got my feet wet.
Hondo, you had mentioned that you were really brought up by some of the greats out there, Carlo, Ernest, but even growing up much younger than that, has barbecue been a part of your life?
Yeah, man. Growing up on the coast, we had barbecues just damn near every weekend. Now the cooking style was a whole lot different back then because, everybody out here uses the Santa Maria pit. Our proximity to Santa Maria, California, which is the birthplace and the home of tri-tip, that's the staple in California. Now it's more recently starting to to reach out in different regions. I remember first traveling and kind of going to Texas and realizing that tri-tip wasn't big out there, and some guys had never even heard of it. And it was odd to me because, for me, it was like an everyday kind of thing. Like you had tri-tip everywhere. And so I had always been around it growing up. My uncles and everybody were really into barbecue, but they really didn't stretch out too much other than that. It was more grilling and having a good time, and nobody was really doing anything serious. And it wasn't until I got married and I actually was talking to my brother-in-laws, and they were the same thing, watching the Pitmaster shows and all that. And they were like, "Hey, this stuff's really good. You should probably compete." And I'm like, "Well, let's look for one." And just so happened, we ended up finding a competition, a little local one in a church parking lot. Went out there, and it was more about drinking beer and having a good time, and that whole bit. And we ended up finishing middle of the pack. And so I kind of decided, like, hey, like, we don't suck at this. Like, let's do another one. And so it just ended up being like that kind of thing, and it took off. And then I just through the channels of my old job, I was in graphic design for 13 years. That's how I met Ernest, was through social media, and it was me doing his graphics for his logo at the time when he was fresh off of Pitmasters All-Stars. He actually sought me out because there was a particular style that I was doing, which was more of a West Coast graffiti style that he wanted. And he reached out and asked if I wanted to design his shirts. And I said, absolutely. At the time, I was a bit of a fangirl because he was really the only Hispanic guy really doing it out there, going up against, Myron Mixon and everybody else. And it was a little bit of a starstruck moment for me, and anybody outside of barbecue, they don't know who the hell I'm talking about. But for me and the guys that were there were like, holy shit, like Ernest Cervantes. I'm like, yeah, it was crazy. Like I was fangirling out. And long story short, we ended up becoming really good friends. And it just turned out he noticed that I cooked too. And he said, hey, do you want to come out to Texas and cook with me? And I said, absolutely. So he flew me out, and we ended up going more than a couple of times. And just became really good friends. And then that led me on to a team, being able to cook at the Royal next to Ernest and Fred Robles, who won a couple years later. And, it just learning from these guys, it just opened my eyes. And I just was a sponge, man. Like whatever these guys needed, I was the water boy. I was the paper towel guy. Like, what do you guys want? I'm building boxes. Like I wasn't cooking any meat at that time for them. And I was just watching, just soaking everything in. And like the other two gentlemen already said, it becomes addicting, man. You get that bug, and it's just one comp is done and you're looking for your next one, and then it's like getting your prep, and you get into your mode where you're just in the zone and you're cooking. It just kind of takes over. It's almost like being possessed. It's crazy, man, but I absolutely love it.
Before we talk about ribs and brisket, because those continue to be the two most popular barbecue meats in the backyard, and we want to make sure that we're going to be giving out some great information to those that are looking to step the game up, as they say, here over the next weeks and months of whatever summer we have left, depending on where you live. In Cleveland, it's winter 10 months out of the year, of course, and we get 1 week of spring and 1 week of fall, and in the middle we get really hot summer. So we're all here because we have a common partner. Oklahoma Joe's has been sponsoring the show, the Barbecue Central show, for the summer, and obviously you guys have some form or fashion of partnership with Oklahoma Joe as well. So let's go back to Enrico here. Talk to me a little bit about how your relationship started and where it is today with Oklahoma Joe.
So it started out about 2.5 years ago, right when COVID hit. I sold my big, huge smoker, my first one, and I went out and just got the regular little Oklahoma Joe regular Pro just for the backyard. And I was shooting a couple of YouTube videos. I sent them over, and they're like, Rico, fill out the application to be a pro team. We'll get back to you. And I was like, okay. And December comes rolling around, and they sent me an email, and I'm like, I didn't really believe it was really them, just because you wouldn't think just a young kid like me would have got that. So I was like, I don't think this is them. And then they called my phone, and like, we actually did send you an email. I'm like, oh shoot, you're actually real. I thought it was a scam. And it wasn't. It was just one of those things that you weren't really thinking would happen to you, and it was that. And then it just kind of like grew. I mean, they sent me out last year the Bronco Pro, which really helped out our game on our ribs. We switched straight over to that, and I've seen a very big increase in scores. And then during the this past off season, my buddy had 2 pros that he had that he didn't like anymore. So I was like, you can just hand those to me. I'll take them, and got those ones all set up. And now I'm playing around with their pellet, trying to get the pellet dialed in for brisket and chicken for myself because I'm trying to lessen a little bit of weight on the trailer and not carrying 4 drums plus the little 18 just so I can do chicken wings. I'm trying to just take some of the weight off, so I'm trying to play around better to get better with my brisket, my chicken on the pellet, but pork and ribs will always stay on the drums.
So you have a pretty good experience with most of the portfolio offerings that Oklahoma Joe's is selling.
Yes, I have.
Excellent. Wes, how did your relationship with Oklahoma Joe come to be?
Similar to Rico there, got a buddy down on the Gulf Coast that was with Oklahoma Joe's, and was talking to him, and I had several Oklahoma Joe's products, so I wanted to reach out to Oklahoma Joe's and kind of give them my background and send some videos, and one thing led to the other, and we got to talking and formed a relationship together. And ever since, I've got 4 Bronco Pros, like Rico was talking about, the DLX 1200 pellet smoker with the new control board, and 2 of their smaller grills they call the Rambler, and I use those all the time in SCA.
Hondo, your relationship road with Oklahoma Joe, how does that happen?
I've probably only owned one other grill other than Oklahoma Joe's previously when I first started out.
Huh.
And my first big purchase was that Oklahoma Joe's Highland at that time was, that was my chariot right there. I mean, it just was like, at the time I'm sitting there thinking, I'm like, okay, I went to Walmart. I seen this thing. I've been eyeballing it every time I go to the store. You walk through that barbecue aisle and you're just looking at them. And it was just, it was one of those things that it kind of just called to me. So made the purchase, started playing around with it. The results were immediate. I mean, just the game just completely changed having an offset smoker. Started using that, and we used that for our first comp we used. And my brother-in-laws liked it so much that they went out and bought one themselves each. And so then it turned into, as we were competing more and more, we had 3 Highlands is what we were competing on from the very, very beginning, before I'd even had talks with Oklahoma Joe's. And then it was probably about a solid maybe 2 years after that. It was Oklahoma Joe's reaching out through social media posts saying, hey, we have an application process online, and if you want to go check it out, give it a shot. And so I filled it out. And then sure enough, got a phone call back and started talking. And then it was, explaining some of the products and what they were interested in, and really liked the content that we had on social media at the time. So everything kind of took off from there. So now, I own 2 Highlands. I have 3 of the Bronco Pros, the tabletop Rambler, the 1200 DLX with the new control board also, which replaced the first generation DLX that I had before, which they had some kinks and some issues with, but they made up for everything now because the new one's absolutely a beast. And then my new favorite one is the Weber Blackjack kettle, which is their spin on the new the Weber kettle style. And then a Longhorn combo gas charcoal grill, which my wife usually uses. So there's a lot of times where I'm cooking or catering, and she'll go out there and fire some stuff on the gas grill for the kids. So
sounds like everybody's got a good breadth of experience with the Oklahoma Joe product line, which is great to hear. From a influencer or sponsored team or individual, whatever you want to call them, there's so many terms these days, it's hard to decipher which one is right and which one isn't. One key piece of advice for anybody that thinks that they want to start to look for a partner, whether it's a grill maker or fuel or whatever it is, doesn't just have to be grills. Hondo, what's your best singular piece of advice for somebody that's looking to get some kind of a partnership going?
I would think just stick to what you really believe in. I mean, that's kind of been one of the things for me. You see so many people out there that push products that they don't necessarily believe in, but just because they're giving them free stuff, they push it. Every brand that we've been involved with, it's been something that we actually use on a daily basis. It's something that we put 100% of our faith into, the same way that they put their faith into us. So I figure whatever you guys end up deciding to go after, just make sure that you believe in that product. And if something comes up, good, bad, or anything, just as much as they stand by you, you're going to be able to stand by them.
Rico, your thoughts on, or what your best singular piece of advice to become a influencer or chase down a sponsor?
I agree with what just got said. It's dedication, it's hard work, and you want to show yourself using the products before you even go out and try to get one. You want to show that you're already on board with what their products are. I mean, I have a few of other sponsors besides that, and I used a lot of their products way before I even tried to even go for them and all that stuff. So it's just dedication, hard work. And if they say no to you, don't worry. A no can also change over time. It can change into a yes. It's just you got to show dedication, and you want to show yourself out there.
Wes, what's your best piece of advice?
I've got two. One is research. Do your research. Go to the stores. Go to Facebook. Check out their website. Go to their social media. But then also look who they have on their team and look at the longevity of the people that's been there. And that's going to tell you a lot about the company.
All right, so before we get into talking ribs and brisket, I thought we would do something that the Barbecue Central is known for, and that's doing absolutely ridiculous game shows. And that's what we're going to do this evening. It's a little trivia about Oklahoma Joe himself, Joe Davidson, who we know is the namesake and originator of this brand. So I'm going to ask each of you a true or false question. I'm sure everybody is well schooled on Joe Davidson history and architecture. So we will go to Rico first. Rico, are you ready for this question? True or false? Joe Davidson is in the Barbecue Hall of Fame.
True.
Final answer?
I believe so. Not 100% sure, but I believe so.
We're going with yes. Is
Yes.
Joe Davidson in the Barbecue Hall of Fame? Yes, of course. For an extra slice of cheese on your sandwich, do you know what year he was put in by chance?
No, I do not, off the top of my head.
Anybody on the panel below? Anybody? No? All right. It's, of course.
I'll say 05.
05. Come on, what are you talking about? It's 2020, of course. This is what we know. 2020. All right. Let's go to Wes. I don't even think the Barbecue Hall of Fame was around in 2005, if I'm not mistaken.
That's a shame.
Wes, true or false? At one point in time, Joe Davidson was partners with another barbecue legend, Jeff Staney.
Well, I'll go with true.
Are you guessing?
I am, totally.
Final answer? I might be tricky.
Final answer.
All right. We'll lock you in. Was Joe Davidson at one point partners with another barbecue legend, Jeff Staney? Yes, of course. Oklahoma Joe's, the original, was founded in Kansas City, of course, and now it's Joe's KC, which is that gas station place that all the barbecue TV shows love to go and look at. So this brings us to Hondo.
Uh-oh.
We got to make the run here. Don't let us down, Hondo. Come on.
No pressure.
True or false? And keeping with the Jeff Staney theme, Jeff Staney is also in the Barbecue Hall of Fame. True or false?
True.
Final answer?
Yes.
For all the marbles, there's actually no marbles, but to run a perfect table, was Jeff Staney also in the Barbecue Hall of Fame? Yes, of course. Outstanding. Well, we've done it.
Yeah, I actually think I was at the Royal when he was inducted. Is why I think about it. I think he went the same year as Melissa Cookston.
Well,
and Tuffy Stone, I believe.
Well, you're
2019, I think.
So you're really close on a lot of stuff here. He won in also with Melissa Cookston, yes, but he also won in with famous Dave Anderson.
That's right. That's right.
And the year was, for the extra slice of cheese, 2017.
Oh.
So 3 years ahead of his business partner, former business partner, but still a good friend, Joe Davidson, Oklahoma Joe himself. All right, so enough of that nonsense. Let's go ahead and talk about ribs. We all love ribs. Damn it. We'll keep this a little bit more backyard focused. If you want to throw in some competition stuff because you're feeling exceptionally gracious, go ahead and do that as well. Rico, as you're going to the market, what are you looking for in a rib, number one? And then on top of that, is it preferred in your palate baby back or spares?
So for myself, I go looking for the rib that has the most marbling, the most intermuscle fat, which is the little striations that you're looking for. And my go-to rib is a spare rib. I love a nice slow cooked or hot and fast spare rib. Those are my downfall.
Do you have a particular purveyor of rib that you prefer, or doesn't matter?
I prefer either Hatfields or Smithfield Extra Tenders. Those are my two go-to brands of ribs that I look for personally, and also for the competition field as well.
Wes, when you're in the store, what are you looking for in a rib, and is it baby back or spares?
I like the spare ribs also. I'm looking for a lot of marbling on top, a nice thick rib, probably in the 3 to 4 pound range, a rack. And then on the back, I like to look for straight bones. I don't like a rack of ribs that's got crooked bones, because that's going to cook different on you, and it's going to draw up, and it will not look good in the turning box.
Do you have a specific purveyor of rib that you like?
I like to look for Prairie Fresh. They're my favorite.
Hondo, you're going to the store. What are you looking for rib-wise? And are you a baby back or a spare guy?
Fat ass spare ribs. That's what I'm looking for. Straight bones, exactly like these gentlemen did. But Prairie Fresh Naturals, those have seemed to be the meatiest ribs that I've had. I used to use Smithfield a lot, but then I kind of found I got better results with the Prairie Fresh when it came to the texture of the actual meat.
All right, let's stay with you, Hondo. From a preparation standpoint, once you get it out of the cryovac, what do you like to do from a trim perspective? And then how far in advance are you rubbing the rib?
I'm getting everything trimmed and rubbed down the night before. I've always been told to do a minimum of 45 minutes before you're doing comps. But for us, we've always gotten the best results doing it around 9 o'clock at night is when the rub first hits the rib. Then we'll just let it sweat it out. But once it comes out of the cryo, we'll rinse it down, trim it off, get the membrane off the back, and then kind of just isolate those middle 8 bones in the middle, trim everything else off to the side. Just make sure everything's all squared up and looking pretty. If it doesn't look pretty when you're trimming it, it's not going to look pretty in the end.
Rico, your thoughts on trimming and prepping?
I completely agree with what just got said, but for me, I'm actually injecting my ribs the night before, and then I'll put my rub on about an hour before I'm putting them on the smoker. When I'm looking for my trim, I just want it uniformed. I want it all being roughly the same size. I'm always taking the first 2 bones off. I'm taking all the flat meat off, so I'm getting left with my 7 to 9 great bones, depending upon the rack of ribs you have. And it's just making sure everything's uniform. That's the biggest key for me, is uniform.
How do you injector of ribs as well?
No, I do not.
Never?
Never
ever?
Yeah. Never ever.
All right. Wes,
it's weird. Yeah. I've seen it done. I just don't get the results I want.
Look, I mean, when I first started doing competition roundtables back in 2007, before everybody was born, nobody was injecting anything. Like, nobody knew what Wagyu beef was. It was poo-pooed. Everybody laughed at, why would you ever do that? And the only thing that was even considered to be injected, and that was like 50-50, was pork butt, but nobody else was injecting anything. You fast forward now, and everybody's injecting everything. Chicken is now being injected if it's not already enhanced, depending on what you're buying. And, of course, now you're seeing ribs on the TV shows like Barbecue USA with Michael Simon right now, who's the Cleveland guy, is showing these competition teams prep up their ribs, and most of them were injecting the ribs over the last couple of weeks that I was seeing. Yeah. So it's now become...
It's nice to see barbecue competitions back on TV again, because it kind of felt like we were left with the cooking shows more or less like the what was the Netflix one, the Great American Showdown, where it was more of a cooking show than actual competition show. So I am enjoying this one with Michael Simon. I'm glad he went out to the actual competition circuit to get a kind of view, because that's a totally different ball game out there. So
Wes, what's your rib trimming and prep process after you get out of the cryovac?
I'd take the membrane off and square up the ends. 2 bones on each sides I remove, because basically they're going to overcook and not be worth eating anyway. I like to inject my ribs also. I have found a sweet injection takes the ham taste away from a rib, and I don't want people thinking they're eating a piece of ham. So I like to inject with a sweet apple juice mixture with some seasonings, and then it'll sit in the refrigerator overnight, and then the next day I like to season about an hour before they go on the smoker.
Do you prefer a particular seasoning or rub, or is that something that you hold secret?
No, actually, all my sponsors that I have is what I use, either catering or private events or at competitions. So Smoke and Ghost Rub All-Purpose and Flaps 20 and Shore Smoke Seasoning. I use every bit of those, and it gives me great results and a lot of great feedback.
Rico, when are you rubbing, and what do you use?
I'm using Oak Ridge Barbecue products, as well as a little bit of Heath Riles for the apple for my ribs. But I'm strictly mostly all Oak Ridge products and everything I use.
Honda, what are you using for seasoning?
So one of our main sponsors, Blues Hog, that's primarily what we use for our ribs, but also a little bit of that West Coast offense with Big Papa Smokers out there. He's got some great products. So between those two, usually go-tos if I like to mix it up and do some side work or something that is a chef's choice or something, I will go with Mark Lambert, who's a good friend of mine, sweet swine of mine. His rubs are absolutely incredible too. So between those three.
Wes, anything else in the prep process that we haven't covered that you always do when you're doing ribs?
No, I think we've all covered it. You do all this, you're going to get a great product, and people are going to be really happy.
Rico, anything else that you're doing in a prep process?
No, not at all. I agree with everything that's got said so far.
All right, Hondo, anything else you're doing before you hit the cooker?
No, I think that's it.
All right, so let's go back to Rico. What are you running the cooker at? And I would assume that, especially for competition, at some point during the cooking process, you're going to wrap. So once you get to that, what does it have to look like, or what temperature internally do you need to get at in order for you to consider wrapping the rib?
So for me, I'm cooking at 300 degrees on the Bronco Pros. I'm hanging my ribs. So roughly between an hour and 25, 30 minutes, I'm wrapping. It all depends on if I'm getting that mahogany color. Normally, I can just tell by feel when it's about time to go into wrap, and that's normally about an hour and 15 to an hour and 20. I've had some ribs that have to go in the wrap a little bit sooner just because they're a thinner rib. But if that's the case, what I try to do is have a hot and a cold side on my Pro. So if that's the case, I'll put that one on the cooler side for a few minutes so they all can get wrapped about the same time. When I'm wrapping, it's basically a sweet with a little bit of heat wrap, using a lot of different little things. I use one of my best buddies I've met in the competition field, Dan Lane. I use his candy apple barbecue sauce in my wrap, as well as a little bit of carbonara sugar, butter, and then just a few other little ingredients that I hold dear to my heart that I will not say.
Until you give your first cooking class, of course, and then you have to spill your guts like everybody does. Hondo, when you get it on, what do you like to run the cooker at? And then if you do wrap, what kind of a process are you looking for there?
I'm using anywhere from like 280 to 285, a little bit lower than that. But for me, usually it's just by sight. We're looking at the color. As long as we get that nice, deep, rich mahogany color on those ribs, usually what ends up happening is that temp will be about the same, about 150 to 160 when we're probing it. But I always tell guys, when they're cooking, just feel it out and see where you're at. If you get your color where you're at, you can achieve your tenderness and temps when you're in your wrap. And once we wrap it up, after that, it's mostly feel. That rib will tell you when it's ready. You get all these, thermopens and everything else out there, and I tell them it's just a high-priced toothpick at that point. You're just poking and prodding, and how it's going to go in and how easy that is. That's pretty much it. So I know guys that, they probe it and they put it in, go to temp, but for me, it's just all about the feel. And I tell these guys, you gotta, remember that these are, muscles from animals, and every single one is different, So yeah, I always tell them, let the meat talk to you. It's going to let you know by feel. And we've done so many, especially at the restaurant with stuff that, you start to get a feel for it. As soon as you pick that rack up and it's wrapped, you already know how much give it has. And if you've overshot or if you're almost about there. And I'm sure these two gentlemen are the same way. You can pretty much feel where you're at when you pick that rack up, if you've missed the mark or if you got a little bit more to go. So it's a lot of feel and sight and look and rely on your senses.
Wes, what do you run the cooker at, and what's the wrap process look like for you if you do it?
Yeah, the ribs go on the Pro Bronco. I like to lay mine flat, not hang them. I normally can get 3 racks on the surface. I like to run it at 325. I'm super hot and fast. 2 hours at that temperature with some nice cherry wood. Before I wrap, I make sure I touch the top of the rib that the seasoning is set so it doesn't wash off into the wrap. But when I go to wrap, do butter, and I like agave syrup and sugar in the raw, some tiger sauce, and a couple more things that I will keep to myself. But that'll stay in the wrap for an hour at 250 degrees. And then, like Hondo said, you go in and grab those ribs, and if it's got that flex to it, they're ready to go. If it doesn't, if it feels like it's pretty stiff in there, that they need to go longer. And if you're looking for a temperature, I know a lot of people do, it's going to be somewhere between 212 and 214 probably if you're looking for a perfect temperature. I think that might be what you've gone for.
Now that we're done cooking these ribs, now This would probably be a little bit more competition focused, but answer however you want. After you get them off, when we talk about brisket and pork, but even chicken, there's always a factored amount of rest time. But I don't know if there's that much of a conversation that's also held when it comes to ribs. So, Wes, if we go back to you, when you get them off, are you doing anything specific? Is there a hold of some sort or a technique that you use after they come off before you would slice them, box them, and run them to the tent?
Take them off the smoker and I set them to the side for 10 minutes, no longer than that. And then I take them out of the wrap and I hold them over the wrap so the liquid runs off. And then I'll put them back on the drum to dry off the top so you don't have a surface area when you put your sauce that takes longer to set. And I put the sauce on and let that set for about 10 minutes. And then I'll bring it to the cutting board and I'll slice and give them to the customer or in a turn-in box, same way.
Hondo, what are you doing after you take them off when they're done? Any process of holding or anything that you do before you slice them up and put them in the box?
Yeah, I'll usually open up the wrap, set it aside. For me, it's the same, anywhere about 10 to 15 minutes. I will separate all the juices that are inside that wrap and put them in the container and let the fat separate. And we'll use the bottom part of that jus. We'll mix it with a little bit of sauce and we'll kind of put that on first, and then we'll actually throw it back on the grill. I have tend to get better results when I put it over some hot coals, like a Weber, for instance, and kind of let that heat char up some of these little bits, before you actually put sauce on it. And then once they come off, we'll sauce them, individually sliced, and then they'll go onto either the offset, depending on what we're using, or back in the pellet smoker for about 15 minutes, let the sauce set, and then they go into the box.
Rico, how do you take them to finish once they're done cooking?
For me, I finish my ribs off a little early. I actually let them rest for about 45 minutes before I even touch them, going back onto the cooker. And for me, I'm pre-slicing before I even sauce. I'll actually dip it into the sauce, like dunk it like people do with chicken. And I heat my sauce up for about an hour. It's in a water bath at 175 degrees, so I know exactly right when I put my sauce on, it's going to be good. And then it's sitting on that cooker for about between 5 to 10 minutes, depending on how much it actually needs. But during that time when I'm putting it back on, I'm taking a handful of just little dust shavings from cherry wood or pecan, depending on where I am for where I'm cooking and who I'm cooking for. And I'll put that at the very back just to get that sauce with a little bit more smoke, just that final hit. And then I'll just put my little finishing powder right back onto it, and I'm all set. And that's how I'll turn it in.
So there's your rib stuff. Now let's talk about what everybody wants to do, and that's a great brisket. So easy. But we'll trouble you guys anyway with some of your great advice here. Wes, let's kind of run back to the beginning like we did with ribs. Brisket's a little bit different monster, right? People know a little bit more about brisket and purveyors and Wagyu or primes or CABs, what have you. What's your favorite, and are you a whole packer guy, or will you just do flats?
Oh, no, I like to cook the whole packer. I'm looking for a nice prime grade. Wagyu's nice, but I'm not going to spend $250 every time for a brisket. But I do like prime. I like to look for a nice thick brisket. 16 to 18 pound range is my target. I also like to look at the point side to make sure I've got a nice area where I can make burn ends out of, because when a customer orders brisket, they also want burn ends. They just don't want the flats, So I'd like to look over the whole thing. Like I said, make sure there's a nice thick surface and there's point and a lot of marbling in the prime.
Rico, what do you like for a brisket?
For personal use, I like a nice prime brisket, like Wes just said. But for competition, I'm using Marble Ridge Farms Wagyu briskets. I'm using their Max line. I'm trying to put out the best product I'm trying to do for these judges. And up here in New England, if you're not cooking Wagyu, you're not going to be scoring that well.
Do you think they noticed, or they've become trained? Their palate has become unknowingly trained to expect it? I
completely agree that it is trained. But what I do differently is I'll actually separate out my point and my flat so I can cook them separately, and I can do them at different temperatures in my cookers.
Hondo, what do you like for briskets?
Prime. That's what we've kind of grown to love out here. And back to what you were saying about taste, I feel like I've gotten better results with the prime as opposed to doing Wagyu, just because most of the judges have not been on the judges circuit for that long, that their palate, it's like the only comparison that I can think of is having somebody who's never had caviar before not appreciate the cost and the palate and for what it actually is. You can have people like, oh, this is, $300 caviar. And it's like, well, I don't care. It tastes like shit. Like, because that's just not what they're used to.
It's like you're talking about me on purpose.
But the people that their palate is trained for that, they can appreciate it. And so you're not going to get that level of judge unless you're at a big competition. So when you're going to, your weekend comps where you're going to do stuff, most of the judges are not going to be accustomed to having Wagyu because they don't know. And for them, it leaves a weird mouthfeel, with them, with that richness of fat that's there that really some people have grown to appreciate and some people haven't. So just personally for me, I've gotten better results with out here, and maybe it's just because the level of judging isn't the same, so we've gotten better results with Prime, but it's the same thing. We're trimming. That is one thing that we do inject, and then we'll rub it and let it sit for as long as we can. And then my Texas back is, we've always finished with a pepper finish with everything on the outside to make sure that you can see that seasoning on it, which is just going to hit your palate, in the mouth as soon as the judges put that in their mouth. But I do separate the point and the flat, so I can cook it at 2 different temps.
Rika, what's your process as far as trimming, seasoning, injecting, and all that stuff?
So for me, if I'm trimming just for a personal, I'll trim right then and there that day. For competition, I'm trimming 3 days before I leave. God forbid something's wrong on that brisket. I want to know before I even get to that comp. I'll recryovac it up. But for me, I'm making my injections the day of the event. I'm using just Butcher's Prime beef with a little beef stock and a little consomme inside there. And for rubs, I'm using Oak Ridge Barbecue and triple beef from Ribs Within.
Wes, your brisket prep operation.
My brisket takes about, this is non-comp, this is for caterings and et cetera. It's about a 45-minute trim. I want to make sure I start getting all the silver skin off the top. Rub will not stick to the silver skin if you do not get it off. Flip the brisket over, trim the fat down to about 1/4 inch. I actually trim all the fat off the point so the burn ends can develop a bark. Then I like to inject also. We got some Moo Magic from Flaps 20 that I always use. It gives it a great savory flavor. And I like pepper. I like pepper, kosher salt, and a little bit of garlic on my brisket. And I feel like that's all you need. And I'm going to cook that brisket nice, low and slow for 12 hours.
What do you run the cooker at?
Well, the first 6 hours I run it at 180. I have started cooking the brisket on the pellet smoker, and I just love the bark that I get. So what I like to do to get the maximum smoke I can out of that DLX is to run it low, 180, and she's going to puff like a dragon and get all that nice smoke. Then I'm going to bump it up to 275 to get it to 170 internal, and then I'm going to wrap it in butcher paper. And it's kind of like Hondo said earlier, you're going to go grab that brisket when you think it's done. It's going to have that jiggle to it, and it's pretty much ready to go. If anybody's looking at temperature, I like 205, and I always like to rest my brisket for 2 hours. Let that moisture draw back into that brisket so it's not dry.
Would you say the longer hold you can accomplish, the better, or is 2 hours really the optimum hold time?
For me, 2 hours is it. Anything over 2 hours, you're wasting your time. Go ahead and plan on 2 hours, and you'll get as good as product as you'll want.
Hondo, your cooking process, what do you run in the cooker at, all that fun stuff?
We do briskets anywhere from like 200 to 215. They do take anywhere from 10 to 12 hours. Same thing, we'll start it out real low, let it go till we get a nice bark. And then when we wrap, just because I've only used foil paper, that's kind of what we've always used with everything. Double wrap that guy. We put a little bit of beef broth in that wrap to kind of let it, develop some more jus. When that guy comes out, you get a little bit more yield out of it, and that's what we dip our slices and everything else in after. But we'll run it like that for probably about anywhere from probably about 6 to 7 hours before we wrap. And the same thing, we're looking for feel. If they're not getting quite the color that you want, we'll let them go for an extra hour or so and wrap them up. The pull temp, though, that we do shoot for 205 to 206. And then the same thing with West, we pull that guy out and let it rest for at least 2 hours. We'll wrap it in a blanket, throw in the ice chest or the Cambro, depending on what's available, and kind of let it ride out. And like he said, the same thing. You pick that guy up and you can feel the give on both sides and got that little jiggle to it, and you already know you're there. You don't have to open that guy up.
What do you do different to the point? You said you would separate it. So how do you treat that?
Yeah. So instead of once it's finally done, we'll actually take it out and we'll hope to get it when we pull out internal. closer to 200 just because we know it's going to go back. It's going to get sauced and go back into the pit to make burn ends. We'll take it out of the wrap. We'll slice it up into our cubes. We'll sauce it, put it on a cooling rack, and then throw that guy back into the smoker and let them get that nice caramelized, real stickiness to the outside that people have grown to love. So,
Rico, your cooking process, what are you running the temps at, wrapping, all that fun stuff?
So I'm cooking hotter than these guys are cooking. I'm cooking at 300 to 325 for my brisket. I'm hot and fast. I like to put it on first thing in the morning and have it done by 11 o'clock. So I'm getting about an hour rest to hour and a half, depending on what I'm trying to do with it. For when I'm wrapping, it's about 3 hours after. It's right at the color I'm looking for, the nice mahogany color to that brisket. And then when I'm wrapping it, just in tin foil, in a foil pan, I'll put it in a foil pan first and put tin foil over the top. When I'm cooking the brisket, I'll have a water pan right below with 4 bottles of water. That's catching all the au jus, and that's what I'm actually using in my wrap liquid for that. And then my brisket point is separate off that. So I'm just putting a little bit of barbecue sauce and a little beef stock into that, and that's how I'm letting that sit on the cooker when it's all done. And I'm pulling my briskets off between 205 to 208, but depending upon the brisket, it's going to be hotter. It could go lower. It's all on feel. So I'll actually set my thermal dots to about 200, and then I'll stop probing at 200 every little bit just to see where I'm looking at. Because sometimes where it's at 200, it might take 20 minutes to could take another hour. You never know on the muscles on the brisket. And once that's done, I'm resting for about an hour, hopefully, to an hour and a half. Depends on what I'm doing. And then I'm just slicing it, putting it back into a little bit of au jus, brushing with a little barbecue sauce, and turning that in.
Wes, how do you finish when you're going to turn in?
Going back to the KCBS days, same way with Rico's. Half au jus mixture, half barbecue sauce. Do a light coat and then a finishing rub, nice savory finishing rub. And I like to put 7 or 8 slices to the box and then 6 pieces of burn in for the judges.
Hondo, how are you finishing that brisket when it's all said and done?
Exactly the same as that. It just sounds like it's the same process, just different rubs and sauces is what it sounds like.
Is that perhaps where some of the staleness has set in competition? That we have 3 guys here on this panel, and I would say 90% of what Hondo's doing or what Wes is doing, what Rico is doing, the other 2 guys are roughly doing the same thing. You're almost rewarded for trying to get outside the box in order to stand out. Has that hurt the growth of the sport, do you think, Hondo?
Yeah, absolutely. The hard part is, I remember seeing it was an interview with, what is his name? Marcus, what's his name from KCBS? I am drawing a blank right now. I see his face, but his whole thing was, talking about the flavor profiles and how they've changed, but then it ended up on sweet at one point and it just stayed there. And now it's almost like everybody with KCBS, it just seems like it's just, you have to be sweet, 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 sweet. And, if you start to veer out of that, it's almost like you're punished a little bit, with your scoring, because these judges, they go through their classes to get certified, as a judge. And it's kind of implicated that, oh, this is what you're looking for. This is what you want. This is what you want. This is what it's supposed to taste like. So, I mean, I have experimented with stuff, and that was, the early days of competition. And I was taking my lickings and getting beat down with the stuff that I liked, that I thought was going to set me apart. And it wasn't until I kind of got in line and started doing what, I was told to do, is when I started getting better results and started bringing home trophies. And it just was like, okay, well, I had to remember and tell myself, I'm not cooking for myself. I'm cooking for these judges. And I think that's why I kind of didn't like it. I liked more doing, caterings and the window of the restaurant industry was, it's instant gratification. Hearing these people talk about, oh, this is like the best barbecue I've ever had, like before, like, they never knew anything like that. And I think that was our uniqueness, was being able to be in competition barbecue and then taking that and some of those techniques and then implementing them into the restaurant industry. And these people had never had anything like that, because unless you went out to a competition, you weren't getting super glazed ribs or super tender brisket that was explode flavor in your mouth. I mean, it just was one of those things that people were kind of blown away by. And that's why I think I got away from competition for a little bit. But now it seems like we're going the opposite direction. We're getting right back into it. So I might be a little, I guess, a little more old school in my ways of what I'm doing in competition. So maybe it needs to go, a little bit different. But I do feel like it has gotten to be a little bit more uniform and consistent with, what you're trying to produce.
Rico, do you tend to agree with what Hondo's saying as far as being punished for getting outside of the box instead of potentially rewarded?
Yes, I totally agree with that. But at the other end, I feel like when you do a People's Choice, when you're thinking outside that box at People's Choice comp, like at a KCBS, and they want to do a People's Choice, I think outside the box a lot. I'll end up doing like egg rolls. I'll do something different, and the people there are always like, "Oh, these are great," and we've done very well doing People's Choice because I do have somewhat of a culinary background. I did go to culinary school. I dropped out, but I did went to a technical high school for culinary, so I know how people perceive stuff and how they want to eat it. But at the comps, it's all sweet. It's all sweet with a little heat now. If you try to change it, you're going to be penalized. I mean, for the first 5 years, I thought I knew what I was doing, and I didn't. I was always giving my best shot, and I started taking some courses, and my scores improved dramatically. And some of the courses I've taken, I've used their recipes, but then I've adapted it to my own, and when I changed it just to how I want it, it's actually done pretty well. But you always have to remember, you're feeding people who might not know how to cook barbecue, but enjoy eating barbecue. That's how I look at it sometimes. Absolutely. Because not everyone can go out and cook like we do at a competition or just out in general. Because we're trying to feed one bite challenge. We're trying to implement the most flavor we could possibly give these people. And hardest part for me is I like something one way, they're going to like it a different way, but I have to cook it the way the judges want it. And every day, that's a constant battle with myself because it's like, I know this could be a little bit better if I do it my way, but it's not how the judges want it. They want this one flavor.
Wes, your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Getting back to KCBS, we're not bashing them. We're just trying to improve that sport, and I would love to see it change a little bit where instead of having a cookie cutter diagram, a judge sits there and eats something and he likes it for what it is, not for what it should be. And I compare it right now to NASCAR. You've got a field of 40 cook teams or 40 sport cars. Well, there's 10 that's going to win all the time, and then there's field fillers. And right now there's a lot of field fillers. And when you spend $1,200 on the comp and walk away empty-handed, that's tough. And there needs to be some simplicity involved to give everyone a fair chance.
Wes, let's wrap it up here this evening as we're recording for a Tuesday release. Anything you'd like to promote? Anything that's coming up that you'd like to tell us about? The floor is yours.
I'm going to talk about Oklahoma Joe's real quick. If you're on the fence about looking a smoker or a brand, give them a shot. Take a look at them. They're built like a tank. They've been around, tried and true. I don't think you'll be disappointed. Customer service is top notch. What we got going on is SCA comps through the summer and a lot of caterings. We'll be traveling up towards Rico's land, Delaware in August. I've got a barbecue trailer that should be here in about 2 weeks, so I'm excited to get that. And just looking forward to finishing out 2020 strong.
Hondo, what do you have coming up? What would you like to promote? The floor is yours.
So, I mean, just like Wes, it's just one of those things that, I've always believed in Oklahoma Joe's as a smoking brand. Just the quality of pit that's out there and the results that you can get for it is great for an entry level as well as professional. Regardless of what you're doing, if you're doing competitions or you just want to be the king of the cul-de-sac, I feel like they got something for you. Now, if you're more comfortable with pellet grills, their pellet grill line has greatly been improved. But then just having stuff in the backyard with that kettle or even just a straight Longhorn, there's so many modifications that you can do out there, and there's so many pages on Facebook and Instagram that these guys are sharing mods and kind of going through troubleshooting stuff if they don't want to reach out to one of these guys. I know any two of these gentlemen, if anybody were to ask them anything about their smokers or how their setup is, I love sharing everything that I've learned over the years with that stuff. So yeah, I mean, like I said, that brand is just tried and true, and I can't see myself using anything else from here on out. For us, I mean, the biggest comp coming up for us is going to be World Food Championships in Dallas in November. So we'll be representing Oklahoma Joe's as well as Blues Hog and B&B Charcoal. Those are my main three sponsors there. They'll be traveling with me and getting everything set up, and we're going to take our shot at that $300,000 purse. So we have a trailer coming that's being built right now. In Houston, Texas, and we picked that guy up in about a month. And so we'll be making the drive out to Texas, visiting some close friends and family, and a lot of my fellow restaurateurs out there, and kind of doing the food tour, and then making our way back here to California, and then have to drive back out to Dallas again in a couple months. So we're excited.
Rico, floor is yours to promote or talk about whatever you'd like here, and I appreciate your participation tonight.
For me, I promote the Broncos left and right to a lot of people. I mean, I've let my Broncos out to a couple of my buddies who are trying to learn how to cook and stuff like that. And the Broncos are tried and true for me. I will stick with my Broncos for comps for years and years and years. The Rambler for SCA is great. Like Wes said, there's an SCA in Delaware. It's a little bit of a hike for me. It's about 6 hours, so I'm trying to figure out if I can pull it out of my hat. I was signed up. I did back out because I am getting married in a year and a half, so I got to kind of put a little money towards the wedding.
Yeah.
But for us, for the competition field, in this coming weekend, which would be the past weekend when people are going to be listening to this podcast, I'll be up at Harpoon vending with a good buddy of mine from Fat Kids Barbecue, and I'm going to be out there cooking, and he's going to be using some of my stuff, so we'll be having a great time. But we have about 3 to 4 comps lined up for the end of the summer to fall, where we have 2 KSBSs locked in so far. One is under my collab team with one of my best buddies out in the field. We this year decided to team up for a couple events and rename our team as Shanty Bag. Combined of both teams' names. And the first time out, our first time teaming up, we got a 180 in Skowhegan, Maine a couple weeks ago. And that was my first 180. That was his.
Oh, congratulations.
He started the process on his cooker, and then we finished it off. We finished everything off on the Broncos. So we worked well, and we're hoping that same speed will go into a Hiram, Maine in the end of August. Then we have a campground competition at a campground in Massachusetts. And then we have Neb's Tailgates, which are in the fall for us. And then I have one of my bigger competitions I do is Culinary Fight Club. And that's back this year in Massachusetts, which I'll be back part of. I got to go defend my championship from that to 2019 when the last time it was for us here. And I just want to say thank you to all my sponsors as well. I have Oklahoma Joe, Better Wood Products, Lump Charcoal, Flaming Grill and Products, Oak Ridge Barbecue, and Chef Dan Lane. I use all their products religiously left and right, and I just want to say thank you for even having us on the show.
This is Rico Pasquale from Q Shanty, or I believe there's a collab team they just said was Shanty Bag, which is hilarious. Wes Edwards from Farmhouse Barbecue, and of course, rounding out the panel, Hondo Hernandez of Show Off Barbecue. Gents, really appreciate the time this evening for breaking down ribs, for breaking down brisket, and then, of course, learning about you guys' continued success, and we hope to have you on the show again soon.
Awesome. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
How was that bonus content segment? You loved it. You loved learning about 3 brand new people that have never been on the show before. You loved learning a little bit more about Oklahoma Joe and how these guys are using them, of course. And you loved the fact that we talked about ribs specifically and brisket specifically, because everybody's wanting to make better ribs and better briskets. A little competition focused here. I didn't know if we were going to go more backyard or more competition, but it seemed to flow more into the competition side of things, which is certainly fine with me. Maybe that will lead to a revival of the Barbecue Central Show's competition roundtable. Yet to be determined, but it could happen. Once again, I thank my panel members this evening, Rico Pasquale, Q Shanty BBQ on Instagram, Wes Edwards, pitmaster of Farmhouse Barbecue, which is Farmhouse Barbecue, BARBECUE on Instagram, and rounding it out, Hondo Hernandez, Show Off Barbecue, that's Show Off underscore BBQ on Instagram. As you've probably noticed, there will be no live show this evening on Tuesday because I am out of town. However, when we come back in 1 week's time, we will be back and better than ever. Malcolm Reed will be here. Sam the Cooking Guy will be here amongst the cast of many others. Perhaps even a sighting from the one and only Dickie Pace. Who knows? So how do I always leave you? September 11th, 2001. I will never forget. And until next Tuesday at 9 p.m. Eastern, this is your program host and proud U.S. American, Greg Rempe. Good night now.
This is Chris Payne from Euclid, Ohio, and you are listening to Barbecue Central.